Welcome to this episode of Strategy Simplified. Today, I'm joined by Ahmed Elkomy, the Managing Director of Consultya, a leading industrial transformation consultancy based in Australia. In this first episode of a three-part series, I talk with Ahmed about operations transformation consulting, his journey from Partners in Performance to DuPont to launching his own firm, and some common mistakes that he's seen in ops transformation. Without further ado, let's dive right in. Welcome to this episode of Strategy Simplified. Naman here. I'm so excited to be joined by Ahmed Elkomy, the Managing Director of Consultya. We're talking today about industrial transformation consulting. So get ready for a fun and fast-paced conversation. Ahmed, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Tim, man. Thank you so much for having us here today.
Absolutely. So you're the Managing Director at Consultya. But before we talk more about the firm and what you all do, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself? Who is Ahmed, and just what's your background?
Sure. So I studied mechanical engineering at uni, and upon graduation, I joined a local construction company here in Brisbane, in Australia. And I was there for a few years doing frontline roles. I was on this emerging leaders track. And what happened in 2008 when the global financial crisis hit is that about a year and a half in, there was a big, massive restructure that needed to take place in the company. And that was the first time I had ever encountered a management consultant. So this guy got parachuted into the company. And because I was this young emerging leader graduate, I got seconded to the boardroom to work with him and some other executives as the analyst who was going to gather things and do some data and number crunching. I just loved the whole thing with how he was conducting himself. He was an ex-military guy who then did an MBA in the US and joined McKinsey for a few years, and then kind of got out and did his own thing. Super sharp, super good with what he does. And I was just fascinated by that individual. And I remember asking, like, what does one do to become a consultant? Like, is this some speciality thing that you got to study? What do you do? I had no idea about what that whole profession was about. And he was tearing the entire company apart: HR, org effectiveness, ops, maintenance. And I thought, wow, this is just incredible. So, worked for him for a period of 4 or 5 months, loved every bit of the experience. When the org restructure was done, just when I thought, all right, let me start applying for consultancies, one that really resonated with me at the time was called Partners in Performance, PIP. They're a global ops transformation consultancy, headquartered in Sydney but operating globally. And as soon as they wanted to start the interview process, I got a promotion nearly a year into just starting my career with the construction company. And it was a pretty senior role. And at the time, because there was a massive commodity boom happening in regional Australia, a lot of the persons were just flogging out to the mines to make a killing. So a lot of the city gigs in construction were, let's say, more opportunistic, right? So I got a really good promotion. And so I told Pip, can you guys please hang on? Like, I got this really cool role. I want to sit in and do it for a little while. A year later, Pip must have had me on a calendar schedule. And they said, hey, are you ready now for your interview? And I said, oh, I'd love to. About 2 weeks ago, I got my second promotion. They're going to give me a whole plant to manage. And like being a plant manager, being the youngest plant manager the company had ever had, is such an honor and a privilege. And I really want to give this a shot. Like at 25, I'm running this ops facility. And I thought, awesome, let me really get into that and do it. And like 10 months in, I turned it around. I had systemized a whole bunch of stuff, etc., that I felt like the day-to-day now running of it was not going to be anywhere near as exciting. And I felt like now might have been the right time to get into the consulting gig. And so, yeah, look, long story short, I then started with Pip as the entry-level analyst in 2011. And ever since then, I haven't looked back. It's been consulting ever since then.
So you went to Partners in Performance in 2011. Talk to me about when and why you decided to leave and what you're doing now.
Yeah, awesome. So one thing that really resonated for me, and I was the guy that came with a little bit of the ops background, right? And kind of the guy that likes to get his hands dirty and run ops, etc. So that firm, Pip, resonated really well for me on the back of the fact that it's a lot about delivering the tangible output, and it's a lot about delivering the result. It's not just the advisory where here's the analysis, here's the roadmap, big high five, rock and roll, see you guys whenever. It was really let's get in and roll our sleeves up and work alongside you and get the results. And that just resonated with my persona. It resonated with how I felt I could be adding a lot of value and actually making tangible change is something exciting, right? And so I joined the firm as the entry-level analyst in 2011, and then a series of quick promotions. I was made an associate, senior associate, manager, and AP. That was all over a span of 7 years, associate principal. And I did about 3 years in Australia on the East Coast. And what happened was in 2013, we were doing this construction productivity and strategy implementation piece with a national broadband network in Australia. Elections were coming up and they needed to get so many more homes connected and they were nowhere near hitting the target. So this is such a super exciting gig. But then out of nowhere, an opportunity came up in Mauritania saying, look, we've just won this big, massive engagement and there's no one to staff it. And we need like a global team of people who'd want to put their hand up and go to Mauritania and get it going. And I remember thinking, I'm guessing you might be thinking the same, where in the world is Mauritania? Like, what is Mauritania? And so I went on Google really quickly and I checked it out. And it's this big, massive country on the western coast of Africa. And a Canadian company called Kinross has an asset there, right? And in 2013, the price of gold plummeted. And so all these companies so they were running good businesses, but it was really on the back of the fact that the gold price was so high, was all of a sudden exposed, right? So the unit cost tanked and those companies were just exposed. And so this was a live or die situation. So we had 10 months to take their unit cost of production from $1,800 an ounce to $1,200 an ounce, or the operation shuts down. Thousands of people will get unemployed and thousands in direct employment. You got to think when you're in Africa and some of those more developing nations, a gig like that is like an economic GDP pillar nearly, right? And so, left Melbourne, which was one of the happiest cities on earth at the time, and took a trip across to Spain, to Las Palmas and the Canary Islands, and there we were in Mauritania, starting this turnaround. And the objective was achieved. And I absolutely fell in love with Africa and with the impact that you could have, right? So it's fine to be tweaking in Australia, right? Like, let's take you up from the 94.5 to the 95.2, and that 0.7 is worth X tens of mil of dollars. They're cool problems to solve for, whereas this was a lot more about, gosh, there is really a lot here that we can do. We're saving jobs and communities. I felt the impact I was having for the same amount of hours that I was spending working was astronomical. It was like a 10 times more impact. And so I fell in love with that work. And it was literally I had the tools of the trade. I had my mozzie net, my mosquito net, I had my malaria pills, and I had my laptop bag. And so they were the three tools of trade. And I went around Africa for the next 3.5 years. It was Mauritania, Botswana, Congo, Mali, Mozambique, you name it, South Africa. I just did the rounds. Fell in love with Africa. I fell in love with the work. On my off swings, because I was doing rosters, I met my wife at a diving resort. She was teaching at an Aussie uni in Dubai. So I set up shop in Dubai and continued rostering into Africa. And by the end of 2017, I had the partner promotion, which was what I've always obviously admired and what I've always wanted. Every aspiring analyst joins a consultancy, and partnership is the dream. And you wouldn't believe it. I would have been the youngest appointed partner in PIP. I was 31 at the time, and I have the offer in front of me there. I had my role model performance as an AP, and I simply couldn't take the job. I was clocking 1 million miles a year, literally. I was working really hard. A lot of the gigs that PIP sells to are what's called pay for results, which means, cover our expenses. And once the dial starts to turn, we'll take a clip of that. It sounds really good in theory, but for the guys that have actually done that work, it's a living hell, because week 3 and the partner is banging the table saying, where's the results and what's going on? And we're burning costs. They're really super stressful gigs. And so I felt like I'm suffering a super early midlife crisis. I was 31 at the time. I couldn't take the offer. And so what I thought, and look, a lot of my mates were either, taking that 6-month drop out. Every 5 years in consulting, there's like a massive drop off of personnel. So a lot of my mates were 5 years to 7 years. I was already 7 years and they're already all dropping off, right? Some were hiking the Kilimanjaro, and others were backpacking in Latin America. The reality is, Naman, that 6 months after they've done their spiritual trek or whatever you want to call it, they come back, and a few weeks into the gig, and they're right in that same dark, miserable hole that they left. They never really fixed anything, right? So I knew I needed more than 6 months, and I knew I needed to really shift and change the way I was working. And I was starting to get a young family as well. I had my firstborn Asia at the time, and I was just doing so much travel, and I was gone away from home for so long. I ended up going to uni, and universities in the US, when it comes to MBA programs, etc., it's a much younger cohort. Europe is on average much older, so that appealed to me because I was 31 at the time. And IE in Spain had a really good setup where you could also do 2 postgraduate degrees, an MBA plus something else, and you can get it done in an accelerated fashion over a 20-month period, so nearly 2 years. So I thought, you know what? And the second language was mandatory, so I thought, awesome. I get to live in a non-English speaking country. I can polish all that French that I learned in the underground mines in the Congo and the Senegal and Mali, which is okay. I get to do 2 degrees and be gone for 2 years from work, and you would have earned well. So I was happy to look after the family and be unemployed for a couple of years, and so that was it. Packed up the family, settled in Madrid, and a couple of years in, I was just super relieved to have been done with consulting for a little while. And then the itch began again, right? You start itching again for the gig, for the transformation, for the result. It's I don't know, but in my particular instance, it's nearly an addiction. It really is. It's like you need it every now and then. You just gotta get the result. You gotta turn the dial. I'm just keen to go and just flip a place and turn it upside down. Going back to PIP, I felt like I was going to be learning more of the same, and the toolkit was great, but then DSS, DuPont Sustainable Solutions, came along, and it came from nowhere really. It was a referral from a friend who had also left PIP and joined DSS. And what I liked about it was the fact that they were just getting carved out from DuPont by a private equity company. So that sounded like a good deal because the sky was the limit in terms of growth that the PE company had mandated, and they wanted to set up their operations excellence practice kind of from scratch. They're really reputable at the ORM stuff, the operational risk management work, and DuPont is really a pioneer in safety. Think of, you get a tier 1 consultancy from the board. It's your insurance policy. You can't go wrong if you get it, even if the outcome was not optimal. DuPont's the same when it comes to safety. So a lot of the heavy industrial boards will look to DuPont if there's a safety risk, if there's an accident, an incident. DuPont has that brand at the board level, right? So I thought, great, let's give this a shot. We're building a practice from scratch. It's really exciting. Let's do something different. And so I joined DSS. It was literally the first day. They've just been carved out by that private equity company. I was based out of Dubai. My mandate was very regional, but also global. So again, I was back on the road. I was in South Africa, all over the Middle East. I was in northern Finland delivering a transformation because, believe it or not, we couldn't find the right resources in Europe to help get that gig across the line. So I found myself delivering a gig in Finland during COVID. And nearly getting trapped in the airport there in Helsinki on a few occasions because they couldn't figure out what's that guy doing, like coming over to Finland and working at a remote mining site like near the Arctic Circle. It nearly sounded like I was making it up in the airport every time. But you know what, all in all, I felt like I had generated enough experience and enough credibility. I was doing so well. And if I'm being very transparent, there's always still that sense of insecurity that I suffer, which is I feel like I don't know enough still. Like I just got to get one more gig, or I got to see one more industry or one more toolkit. I don't know what it is, but I keep doing so well. And the more I do well, the more I think, oh my God, I feel like I'm nowhere near enough where I should be learning. Yeah. And IE triggered that entrepreneurship flair. It's really big on the IE Venture Lab. And so I was part of the IE Venture Lab. And going in, and it's similar to that Shark Tank, right, where you got to get in and you got to pitch your idea and get it torn apart, and you got to keep coming back. It really started that whole entrepreneurial journey in the back of my mind. And look, I did start an entrepreneurial venture while I was doing the MBA. Believe it or not, it was a mining gig in Africa. Believe it or not, we found some gold, but it just wasn't enough, and I ran out of money, and I wasn't raising any money. So I, on my personal funds, commissioned like a couple of exploration gigs. We went into the desert, we did trials, we sent the assay samples And we found gold, but it wasn't enough. And it wasn't enough to start a company. I ran out of money. I had a family to look after. I was just graduating. And sadly, I had to let go of that venture. But I'd learned a lot and I loved it. There was just something about creating an enterprise that was super rewarding. And again, it's back to I don't know anything. And that seems to keep me going for whatever reason, right? And so 2.5 years in with DuPont Sustainable Solutions, and I was back in Oz. I settled with my family, and I felt like this sounds like it's about the right time to start doing my own thing. I can pick and remember, when you're senior in companies, also there's a lot of decisions that are not necessarily yours. You might believe that you want to tackle a problem in a certain way or do it in a certain flavor under different terms, but you're kind of also confined and bounded to the gig, right? To the commercials that the firm has sold, and you're also confined to the team that gets brought on to the engagement. I wanted a situation where I can craft the entire solution independently. This is what I think. This is the client who I want to work with, and this is the team that I want to bring on. And so fast forward, and Consultya was kind of born January 2022. Then when I left the SS and said, thank you so much, but I feel like now is the right time for me to get out there and do my own thing.
We'll be right back after this quick break.
Have you ever heard a new digital trend and thought to yourself, okay, does this really matter? Asking the right questions helps you cut through the noise and get down to what matters most. I'm Jim Hertzfeld, host of the What If, So What podcast, where we discover what's possible with digital and figure out how to make it real by asking what if, so what, and most importantly, now what? Subscribe and listen, and together we can turn big ideas into tangible actions so you can get shit done.
Hey, consulting firms, I'm going to take a quick sec to speak to you. Is your lack of brand awareness in a certain market hurting your recruiting efforts? Raise your firm's brand awareness and prestige and expand your recruiting pool by partnering with Management Consulted. Our expert team works with you to co-develop engaging content that speaks to future employees, potential clients, and online search algorithms alike. In addition, we help you put on curated events to speak directly to top talent in our 3 million strong community that is looking for consulting roles now. Reach out today to speak with a member of our team to see how we can help you showcase what makes your firm unique. Write us, team@managementconsulted.com. That's TEAM@managementconsulted.com. Or find us by clicking the link in the show notes. All right, let's get back to the show.
Okay, so you went from Partners in Performance to a 2-month hiatus in Madrid. By the way, one of my favorite cities in the world. If I had to take a little break from work, which I understand school is not always a break, but it feels like it coming from consulting, going to school.
It was.
There are many, many worse cities in the world that you could do that in than Madrid. So I respect your judgment just based off that. Then you went to DuPont Sustainable Solutions and then started Consultya about 1.5 years ago. So talk to me about Consultya. Like, what do you do? Who do you serve? And like, why would I work with Ahmed and Consultya?
Yeah, great question. So look, maybe I didn't mention that I did end up making the partnership in DuPont, and I sold some incredible work for the firm. So I ticked the boxes. I felt like if I can sell, I can sell. I didn't realize that that brand behind you does a lot of the work for you too, but I was confident that I could orchestrate the transformation single-handedly.
It's the most transferable skill, I think, in business, the ability to sell.
Yeah, exactly. And so, PIP was all delivery, DSS was a lot of sales. So I felt like I combined the best of both worlds when it came to putting it all together. So look, what I do is predominantly industrial, right? So mining, metals, oil, gas, construction, utilities, anywhere normally where someone needs to be wearing safety gear and a hard hat is where I tend to operate. It's my happy spot, and it's really where I can add tremendous value. It's one thing to have the toolkit and the experience, but also over time, and when you do that stuff over and over, you really start to have your own benchmark up here. Like you start having that common sense of how long a transformation could take just based on you spending a couple of days looking and observing, right? And don't ever discount how important that is. Like the toolkits and the frameworks and all that is really important. But what starts, in my case at least, to really tick the box is you just got to have the confidence to know that, hey, I've seen enough of this, that, there is a little bit of that benchmark that is really me. I can benchmark this up and I can tell you where I think you sit on the spectrum.
A little bit more qualitative.
Yeah, without having to refer to a very fancy maturity assessment where I need to tick, a million boxes. Sure, we can do that as part of the gig, but I can come in and I can be very, very directional and very indicative with where I think you are. And so Consultya is really about heavy industrial clients mainly. And again, it's really back again to delivering results. This is not about delivering strategy. This is about delivering results and turning the dial. But what I'm trying to do differently, again, because you might argue, well, how's that different than to what you've done previously? Sustainability is really at the core of it, and not just saying that word, but really making sure that there is a tremendous investment in capability building, that I'm taking a little bit of a step back. I'm not doing the work. I am 100% delivering through the line. So if it means that I need to physically sit next to a person and stare at the screen while they do it, so be it. But that's my deal. My deal is if you're going to keep outsourcing the work and farming it out, that's good, and a lot is going to happen really quickly. But I can promise you that I've seen it time and time again, that it fails and it falls over when the consultancies go. And it's very simple math. You're bringing in a bunch of very high caliber people who are working 12 plus hours per day, and they're doing a lot of stuff every day. They're really busy. You extract those out of the organization, and somehow you're going to build a sustainability tracker, and that's all going to be good to go. And it's not. There's an incredible amount of hours that you've just taken away from the company, and because they over time integrated and starting adding tremendous value, the ability to just extract them out, thinking they're going to get replaced by very similar piece from the client side, is an unrealistic expectation in every way, shape, and form. And so I'm a firm believer that one way to really build the capability is to sit back and coach, like literally coach, as in you will build the model, you will build the tracking, we will do the coaching together, but I take an active role back. Now, if it means that we get there a little bit slower, that's okay, but I guarantee you that they've done all the work. And so we're starting to build a very different product then for the client, which is, this is your team doing the work under my guidance and under my instruction and under my watch, but they're doing the work, and so they get it fully. It's not that I've built a fancy model and then I'm going to just conduct a 2-hour training at the end of the transformation to tick the box and say, yep, I've handed that over to the client. Well, they were never going to be able to build anything like that anytime soon. Like, your consulting company has invested in you as an individual for years to get you to build a model of that standard, for example. That was never going to get done in a couple of hours as far as a handover goes. So I've seen it time and time again. These things fail. They will spend a lot of money in a 4 to a 6 month window, like it's millions of dollars, and it's this consulting storm, and then it ends. There's a lot of consulting fatigue. It's like, what the hell just happened? And then everyone's trying to pick up those little bits. And I go to organizations and I can recognize, that's from that MBB, and that's from that company, and you can see this. It's like a war has taken place, and there's little remnants of whoever has dropped whatever they did at the time, right? So I'll see a little template here, and I can recognize it just because I've been in the industry now, who's done what work, and you can just see the client sitting there going, Ahmed, can we just have something simple here that we can just get started with, because it's just incredibly overwhelming, right? And every year there's a massive corporate mandate for a massive consulting storm somewhere, and everyone's just exhausted. And so I feel the angle that I've come in from, which has been successful so far. So recent engagement is a client has just come out from an MBB top-down assessment, and I swear to God, it's a 600-page deck. And I'd like to think that I understand consulting and that I've transformed businesses and I've done relatively okay. I'm sitting there struggling. Like, by the time you get to page 150, and I'm getting to page 200, I'm starting to lose sense of what it is that we were trying to solve for to start with. And every page has 3-4 charts. 600 pages, 3-4 charts. You do the maths. There is an incredible volume of information that's getting handed over. And so you'll spend millions of dollars to get a fancy report put together for you, only for the client to come back and say, hey, Ahmed, what are we doing tomorrow? You know, what am I actually doing? I've got this thing here that's like dusting away, and I don't know where to start. And so, you know, great. There's a market for this. There's a market for a little bit of simplicity. And I think there's even a stronger market now in terms of building capability, sitting back, letting it unfold, letting it fall over. It's under the watch, there's coaching, and it's going to get there. It may be a little bit longer. So that's really the angle that I'm trying to come in with Consultya at the moment.
First of all, let's just acknowledge that a 600-page deck is madness. But beyond that, I love the balance there. Like, hey, I'll sit with you and I'll watch you do the work, or I'll co-work with you if that's what it takes. I'm not just handing over a deck and saying, well, hey, good luck. But at the same time, I'm going to enable transformation by building your people up and by building your teams up so that this transformation is, like you said, sustainable. You're able to carry it forward long after I'm gone. I love that balance. I think that's, you're really straddling the line well between consulting and coaching there. And a lot of these organizations need both. So let's say I'm in industrials, I'm in mining, and I'm listening to this and I'm thinking, okay, how do I know if I need Ahmed's help? Right? Like, are there like one or two signs that you could share with me and share with our audience? Like, okay, here's how you know that you need to engage a consulting firm or engage Consultya in the work of industrial transformation.
Yeah, sure. So look, one example, which we'll probably just reference now, but let's maybe bring it again to a different angle, is you're going to get this corporate report, this top-down assessment, this consulting storm. Someone's going to come in for 6 weeks and produce a massive report, and you won't know what to do with it. So sometimes there is, you know what, I need a consultant of sorts to really take that into now the granular bit that I need to do tomorrow, because I don't know what I'm doing tomorrow with that big massive report. So there's steps. Exactly. I need practical, tangible, realistic next steps that, taking into account the maturity, the context, the resourcing that I have, and every other constraint that I have. I mean, these top-down benchmark assessments, I can't believe people are still paying for them, but it's fine. If it's getting done, and if it's corporate mandated or whatever it is, that's fine. But there is now an element of pragmatism that needs to come in. So that's point one. Point two can be, I am not hitting my budget, or I'm hitting my budget, but I'm not hitting it safely. Or I could be hitting my production numbers, but I'm not hitting them cost effectively. There's something in my P&L that is just not lining up, and I need a little bit of help here. I need to get across the line. I'm 4 months into the financial year or 6 months in, and I can see that I'm nowhere near getting where I need to. And it could be a strike two for me. It could be that we really need to get this going. I may need help in actually getting this going, as in I need the production numbers or the cost numbers, production to either go up or costs to come down, but I need help in actually realizing this ain't going to get done. This is normally where it comes from. Sometimes people will have now a very crystal clear requirement, like I need to build a new management operating system. My business is run by people. It's not run by processes. As people come and go, things keep falling over, and we seem to reinvent it every time from scratch. I need a good MOS, a good management operating system, that manual that's going to tell me, okay, here is how we go from the annual plan to the quarterly to the monthly, weekly, day shift execution level, and here's how we're going to close the loop, daily, weekly, monthly, and I want this documented, and I want this to be RACI'd, and I want this to be, tied into the calendars and tied into the deliverables. I don't want the KPIs to be cascaded. So a lot of people require that MOS quite often as well. And so sometimes they might come to you with a very specific requirement, like, I need a good MOS. Who's out there who can get, a really good MOS in? So sometimes I could, I'd put my hand up to that and say, yep, done dozens of those. Happy to come in and not just, again, retrofit whatever it is. It is bespoke. It will be bottom up. It'll be co-design co-design is such a cool word that I use. I don't know if it's a buzzword or not, but what I'm trying to say with co-design is we're gonna build this together. I'm not coming in with some fancy standard that I'm just shoving down everyone's throats. We're gonna work bottom up, engage the front line as well, and really build this together. So that again, by the time we're done, we're not handing anything over. I don't like handovers. A handover means that you've worked independently of the line. It means that there's some sort of a distance that you've been operating at that you now need to try and bridge with a checklist. So I don't do handovers on my gigs because I make myself as dispensable as possible as early as I can, and that's genuinely the case. My success is that I get to walk away as soon as possible, and I can happily commit and honor that. It's not about me just sitting there and milking the bills month in, month out because I can. It's how can I get you to stand up on your feet very quickly and as sustainably as possible so that I can work myself out. And that is success for me. And when I present that to executives, I genuinely mean it. My gig is to not embed myself in your team. I want to get out there as quickly as I can.
And that's a differentiator between you and the traditional players in the space, right? Where one of the internal metrics of success is, can we sell follow-on work? Can we sell down?
Yeah, of course.
Can we get embedded inside the client organization? And so coming in from day one and saying, my goal is to work myself out of a job, I trust that that's a pretty compelling message.
And it's genuine. I'm not sitting there trying to, be a unique differentiator in the market. I genuinely believe that is a noble and a realistic objective that I can achieve. And the billing again, and so that comes back to the billings, because I was the partner. You gotta, hey, what's next, Ahmed? What's next? What are we squeezing? What are we doing? I don't want to squeeze and I don't want to milk. And I'm not working for billables. If I can get, good results and get firms to stand up and I can build teams, I feel like I'm making the world a better place. And funny enough, work will come. I don't have to approach it through some, what I'd call a sleazy way just to make it work. I can genuinely work myself out. And then another opportunity will come up elsewhere, and that's fine. And that makes me happy and very fulfilled about the work that I do. Yeah.
We've just barely scratched the surface today, talking about ops transformation. But let's say someone's listening to this and thinking, you know what? My team, my division, my organization needs this. I'm going to try and go it alone, right? Are there one or two common mistakes that you see inside of operations transformation that you can just caution us against before we start to try and do this on our own?
Yeah, of course. Well, let's say, look, here's three things that you typically don't get to see very well when you go into the organizations. Number one, it's not really quantified. I don't really have a good, solid, quantified pipeline of initiatives that I'm working on. So you say, okay, so how big is your transformation? And it's, look, and it's measured in the number of initiatives. And sometimes you'll hear hundreds of initiatives, and I'm going, those poor people, like they're just suffering this admin storm that they've created. But so it's just measured in number of initiatives and stuff, and it's not really bottom line value. So that's one. Two is I'm looking at the resourcing and how it's getting put together and who's doing what. And again, it's done separate. Either there's like an internal business improvement team that is just sitting there administering initiatives in head office, and then there's supposedly the line that's going to get out there and do all the hard work, and then they're just bridging the gap with reporting. Really bad, and it will never work. And three, what you then get to see a lot of is it's not tied to the business metrics. It's the number of initiatives, it's the number of people that we've trained, it's the number of stuff that we've, what are we actually, so here's the baseline P&L, here's the baseline metrics, what is actually going to change bottom line, and you don't actually get to see how it ties in. And so when you start challenging and doing, looking at prioritization effort and all the rest of it, you'll realize that you're probably not you're not consuming your resources on the 80-20 here. You've spread yourself out so thin trying to fix every single patch on every wall, when the reality is you could have consolidated 80% of your resources into those 20% problems, because they would have given you the biggest bang for buck, in terms of value and speed as well. and you're not getting either of them. So, an executive can then sit at the top and look at, what, I'm investing in this, but I'm not getting a return. I'm not seeing the P&L is basically not moving. And it's for all sorts of reasons. Every monthly meeting we have, there's a story about why the numbers haven't trended in that direction that we wanted them to trend in. And so, you start getting these signals as the executives. And that's when you start thinking, okay, well, maybe I just need an external eye to come in and just really have a look at how we're doing this and what needs to change and all the rest of it.
So you occupy a very specific niche. You do operations transformation inside the industrial space. If that applies to folks that are listening today and they want to learn more about you, learn more about the firm, how can they reach out?
Very straightforward. So you can contact me on probably LinkedIn is where I get most of the inbound, right? So people can message me directly. My phone number and email are also there available in public. So feel free to come in, add me, text me, email me, call me. Love to chat and love to get to know people and love to get out there and do more work. Yeah.
I love that. Well, we'll share the link to your LinkedIn, Ahmed, in the show notes. So folks, if you're listening to this, just go ahead and read the show notes and you'll find Ahmed's LinkedIn directly linked underneath the episode here. Ahmed, one of our traditions here at Strategy Simplified is that we love to end our episodes with a couple of personal questions to get to know our guests a little bit better and on a more personal level. And so just based on your background and your story, I've got a couple of burning questions I want to ask you. First, look, you've traveled the world. You've kind of traveled Africa, Europe, Southeast Asia, etc. What's next on your travel bucket list?
Okay, good question. I have never been to Latin America yet, and I haven't visited the US yet, surprisingly enough. So the US is definitely big on my agenda. My younger brother lives in Atlanta, so there's a real reason for me to go now, at least, and visiting family can be a good reason. And Latin America is a place that is just it's an entire continent that I haven't even explored yet. So I now that I'm in Oz, you can get the flights from Sydney to LA, kind of like from the other side. So I'm looking at getting out there from the other side and making my way through the west coast of the US and hopefully doing a bit of coverage of the US and Latin America. But definitely, two big chunks of the world that I haven't seen yet.
Amazing. Highly recommend the drive up Highway 1 on the west coast of the US. It is comparable to almost any other place I've been in the world. It really is stunning. And if you ever find yourself in Austin, Texas, please let me know.
Amazing. I look forward to that.
First drink is on me. So,
excellent. No, thanks, buddy.
You mentioned, when you were at IE, you started your own mining venture, which that's a conversation for another day. I have to ask you about how you found gold.
Yes.
Have that conversation offline. But is there a career that you thought about going into that you have never explored? Like in a different life, would you come back and do something else?
Pretty good question. Would I have done something else? Look, I guess as I got a bit more senior and I got more involved in contracts and terms, etc., I got fascinated by law a little bit more as time went by and as I got more exposed to it. And I started to also see and realize a lot of similarities in terms of how the problems are solved just through a different lens, a legal lens, how there's frameworks, how there's experience, and how there's context, and how you need to kind of bring those all together to make it work. Maybe in a different life or in a different time, I would have considered a legal practice, just because it looks like it's very similar, just looking at things more qualitatively, I suppose. But yeah, it's definitely something I would have considered. Yeah.
Law school was almost in the cards for me as well. And I have to say, I'm very grateful that I did not go down that path. So.
No, I'm the same. No, yeah, exactly. And I look back and I think, engineering is a really good degree, but gosh, like as a mechanical engineer, I was so tangled up in fluid mechanics and hydraulics and all that kind of stuff. And when I went back into uni later at IE and I was doing development economics and some of those modules, a lot of the world affairs were also starting to make a lot more sense. in terms of role of central banks and reserve bank. Like, it's all that stuff that you've read in the news, but a lot of it just started to all of a sudden make more sense after that business and economics training. And so I always felt, so maybe there is like a really cool hybrid between engineering and business economics, but I definitely felt like, gosh, I almost feel like I should have learned some of that stuff a bit earlier on. I know one will never learn everything all at once, but yeah, there's definitely a merit in the engineering work and that detail, because you need to get into the detail if you're going to make a result. And that's a thing to any aspiring consultant out there. You can have all that big macro stuff, and that's all very exciting, but you'll never change. And I think the IBM transformation by Lewis, I think he was the guy who did that big, and I think there's a really good interview where he goes, what people don't get is that we have to get to the lowest common denominator at the process level and change those. And once we changed processes is when we started to actually make a change in the organization. Engineering gives you that little bit of, let me really get in and get dirty and get very processy, because that's where a lot of the change happens. So I'm glad I did that training as well, but I'm also glad that, you also get to do some of the bigger picture stuff as well, because it helps to also contextualize and put things in perspective. Yeah.
I like that. Consulting is so much about top-down problem solving, but I think a lot of these operational transformations happen from the bottom up. It has to be. And that's an interesting mindset shift, if you're just used to thinking about consulting from a strategy consulting perspective.
Exactly. Yeah.
Ahmed, really appreciate our conversation today. Your passion for your work, your lust for learning really resonates with me. I've really enjoyed our conversation today.
No, I'm really pleased, man. And thanks again for the opportunity. I'm glad you enjoyed it. I definitely enjoyed it. And yeah, look forward to catching up again. Thank you so much.
Ahmed Elkomy is the managing director of Consultya. He joins us today from his office in Brisbane, Australia. Thanks for listening to today's episode of Strategy Simplified. If you enjoyed today's episode, please rate, like, subscribe, and review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. We need your help to tell the algorithms that this podcast is useful, entertaining, and beneficial. Help us get Strategy Simplified into the ears of more listeners. Thanks in advance, and we'll see you next time.